Behind Jim Carrey's smile lies something agonizingly silent. He was the world's go-to person for decades when things got too tough. The one who, with a twisted smile or a line that was too quick to catch, could lift millions. However, there was a person engaged in combat that most people were unaware of behind that electric charge. Despite being loved for his humor, Jim Carrey's personal life was characterized by loss, loneliness, and a lengthy list of scars that he would never be able to fully recover from. And the more you examine it, the more his laughter seems to be a shield that he carried for a much longer period of time than anyone knew. The youngster who discovered how to conceal his suffering. Behind a smile, Jim Carrey was born in Newmarket, Ontario, on January 17, 1962, the youngest in a family struggling to stay together. Jim's mother, Kathleen, suffered from a chronic illness and was frequently bedridden. As a child, Jim would pace the corridors and make faces in the mirror to help her cope with her suffering. Percy, his father, was a saxophonist who once dreamed of playing on large stages, but he had given up music to pursue a secure career as an accountant. However, when Percy was fired, even that stability vanished, sending the family into a financial crisis that would affect Jim for the rest of his life. They ended up without a place to live. Jim, who was only a teenager, helped the family survive by working as a caretaker and security guard at a tire factory. The Carreys ended up living in a Volkswagen bus parked in his sister's driveway, and later in a tent on the shores of Lake Ontario, but not in a dramatic Hollywood way. At 16, he left school and never came back. Beneath the silly impressions and accents, there was a youngster who was afraid of failing like his father. Jim has frequently stated that the most important lesson he learned in his life was witnessing his father give up on his aspirations. Even though Percy was funny, possibly even funnier than Jim, he still fell despite choosing safety. Jim would subsequently explain, "You can fail at what you don't want. Therefore, you might as well try your hand at what you enjoy." That conviction turned become Jim's motivation. However, it also originated from a place of intense terror. The dread of not being enough, the fear of being helpless, and the fear of becoming invisible. Rather than chasing fame, he pursued comedy like a person fleeing a fire. The hope, the denials, the frantic struggle for a respite. Jim Carrey's success didn't happen immediately. It was a protracted period of humiliation, terror, and evenings when he questioned whether he was crazy to think he could make people laugh for a job. Confident that talent alone would open doors, he sent a CV to the Carol Burnett Show when he was 10 years old. Most kids are crushed by the kind of courteous form letter they wrote back. It became gasoline for Jim. However, the world was not yet prepared to welcome him. At the age of 15, he landed his first stand-up show in Toronto, wearing a polyester suit that his mother had chosen for him. It was a catastrophe. He was jeered by the crowd, and his impressions were not accurate. He thought about giving up permanently because the humiliation was so severe. However, the only thing he had left that made sense was comedy. 2 years later, he made himself return to the stage, resolved to start over. He experienced heartbreak and hope during the late 1970s and early 1980s. He tried out for Saturday Night Live 3 times and was turned down each time, including once when he wasn't even permitted to perform for Lorne Michaels. In 1981, he performed poorly as the rock band Godot's opening act and was jeered off stage. There were glimmerings of optimism as he sat in an empty dressing room later, wondering whether this was really what he was supposed to do. He was described as a rising star in a Toronto Star review. At Yuck Yucks, a comedy club, he attracted attention. An evening at the Improv included his performance. He went on tour with Rodney Dangerfield. But there were times when every step ahead almost broke him. Feeling that he was lagging behind, he researched other comedians incessantly. He repeatedly rewrote routines. He exerted so much effort that loneliness, a byproduct of obsession, became the norm. He made his biggest risk by relocating to Hollywood in 1983. In a desperate attempt to get recognized by The Tonight Show, he performed at the Comedy Store. But initially, Los Angeles was unfriendly to him. He was deemed too strange, too vivacious, and too much by casting directors. These Hollywood rejections didn't just hurt a young guy who had already experienced homelessness. They also reaffirmed the anxiety he had held since he was a small boy. Fame, wealth, the silent burden of achievement, and the possibility that even if he gave it his all, it might never be enough. Between 1990 and 1994, Jim Carrey's life underwent a permanent transformation. However, the fissures beneath the surface continued to widen even during his breakthrough years. Hollywood finally took notice of him after his 1990 to 1994 role on In Living Color. The frenetic energy, the fearlessness, and the strange characters. Casting directors who had previously dismissed it all suddenly embraced it. The doors he had been hammering on for years suddenly flew open. In a single year in 1994, 3 films transformed his life: Dumb and Dumber, Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, and The Mask. They were all huge hits, proving that Jim Carrey was more than just a comedian. He was a sensation. $72 million was earned by Ace Ventura. Globally, The Mask earned over $350 million. The amount of Dumb and Dumber exceeded $270 million. He was unlike anything Hollywood has seen. Studios were vying for his services. His name was being yelled by fans. Additionally, starting with The Cable Guy in 1996, Jim Carrey became the first actor in history to receive $20 million for a movie. This was the dream from the outside. From the inside, it seemed like it was about to collapse. Because Jim was grieving while everyone else was smiling. He lost his father in 1994, the year he rose to fame around the world, after losing his mother in 1991. He was burying the 2 people he had dedicated his life to making proud at the pinnacle of his achievement. He once remarked that it felt like the conclusion of one trip and the start of a new, far more solitary one. The night he placed a $10 million check in his father's coffin. During this time of extreme stress, his marriage to Melissa Wimmer ended. Everything was exaggerated by fame, including expectations, fears, and feelings. And because of his erratic mood swings and continuous work schedule, relationships started to fall apart. Less than a year later, his second marriage to Lauren Holly ended due to the same strain. Every box office success was the result of a man's inner spiral. Jim could make everyone laugh, but he was unable to put an end to the pain he held within of him. Fame was simply making the hole in him larger rather than filling it. And the general public was unaware of the true weight of that silence. Love, grief, and the catastrophe that almost took his life. Jim Carrey was one of the most well-known celebrities in the world by the 2000s. He demonstrated his dramatic depth in Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, won Golden Globes for The Truman Show and Man on the Moon, and established to Hollywood that he was more than just a rubber-faced comedian. However, despite his career's remarkable achievements, his personal life was falling apart. In painful cycles, his relationships came and left. January Jones, Lauren Holly, Renee Zellweger, and then Jenny McCarthy for 5 years from 2005 to 2010. Jim is often described as being kind at one point and aloof at another. A man whose heart alternated between walls too high for anybody to climb and vulnerability. Despite his success, he struggled with depression, which he subsequently said had plagued him since childhood. After using Prozac for years, he finally stopped taking it because he said it merely made him numb rather than better. However, nothing prepared him for meeting 27-year-old Irish cosmetics artist Catriona White in 2012. They had a passionate, erratic, and frequently unpleasant relationship. Love, jealousy, reconciliations, and extended silences are all part of this intermittent emotional maelstrom. But despite her personal difficulties, she loved Jim just as much as Jim loved her. Then September 2015 arrived. At the age of 30, Catriona was discovered dead from a deadly combination of prescription drugs. It was determined that she killed herself. Jim took a plane to Ireland. She stood with her family as they buried her next to her father, carrying her coffin through the rain. It appeared to be a tragic celebrity event to the outside world. The narrative soon took a more sinister turn, though. Jim was accused of giving her the pills under a false name, giving her sexually transmitted diseases, and exposing her to a harmful lifestyle through private text messages in a wrongful death case filed by her mother and her divorced husband. Deeply personal charges and painful letters were disclosed to the public. Jim filed a countersuit and produced proof that some of the documents were fake. Although the matter was eventually dropped, the harm had already been done. Jim Carrey left the entertainment industry. His name was associated with scandal, grief, and hushed condemnations rather than humor. For years, he gave up performing and turned to painting, isolation, and quiet. At this point, the world stopped laughing, Jim stopped acting like he was all right, and he vanished from Hollywood and the war that no one was watching. White finally passed out during the Cathriona lawsuit. Jim Carrey didn't feel vindicated or rejoice. He just disappeared, as if he had nothing left to offer. The man who once topped every box office chart and had everyone laugh with him withdrew from public life. He had stated years ago that celebrity is not a place where one can stay comfortable for very long. Now, however, it was intolerable, not simply uncomfortable. He stopped taking on significant tasks in 2016. He stopped posting on social media. The studios that previously pleaded with him to be a movie star had no idea where he was or if he would ever perform again. Jim turned to solitude, painting, and sculpture, not to recreate himself, but to live. What he never spoke aloud was made clear by his incisive and passionate artwork. Anguish, disillusionment, political annoyance, and sorrow from a life gone awry. During the 2016 election, he started creating political cartoons, each one getting angrier and more expressive than the previous. They were both brilliant and unsettling to different people. However, they served as a form of catharsis for Jim, allowing him to release all of his innermost thoughts and feelings onto a canvas, rather than allowing it to silently overwhelm him. He lived a quiet life away from red carpets and studios after selling his Los Angeles property for almost £25 million. His friends claimed that since Cathriona's passing, he had changed. He distanced himself from people, from the commotion, from Hollywood. He had been plagued by depression since he was a young boy, and it now accompanied him everywhere. Fans observed that he appeared slimmer and emotionally spent even on his 62nd birthday. But Jim attempted to recover in this quiet. He talked candidly about stopping Prozac years ago, giving up alcohol and drugs completely, and that he wanted to confront life without numbing himself. In his bizarre semi-autobiographical book Memoirs and Misinformation, he subtly revealed to the public how self-doubt, loss, and celebrity had almost ruined him. He gradually returned to acting with Sonic the Hedgehog in 2020, following a 4-year hiatus. It wasn't supposed to be a victorious comeback. It was just a man trying to see if he still fit in with a world that had once supported and then almost destroyed him. The unexpected return and the unanswered question. Jim Carrey shocked everyone by declaring he was prepared to retire in 2022. He claimed that only a script written in gold ink would ever bring him back to the spotlight after filming Sonic the Hedgehog 2, since he had done enough. He was widely believed. It felt reasonable, even good, for Jim to finally leave an industry that had robbed him of so much after everything he had been through.